I'm going to talk about culture. I'll say a little bit about politics and where this country may be going right now. It's a very difficult time for a great many people, not just in this country, but throughout the world. We'll talk about ways in which we can help each other, support each other during some very difficult times when there's a lot of confusion. A lot of people are wondering, where are we going in this world? Where are we going? We'll talk about mutual aid, quite a bit about mutual aid. Talk about Charles Darwin, and I'm going to say quite a bit about flamingos. Okay, so you got pictures of these pink birds all over the place this morning, so keep them in mind. And when you go home and somebody asks you, what did the minister talk about? You can say, he said theology is for the birds, you know. Actually, I just said that right now. Theology is for the birds, and the minister said we can learn a lot from nature, dolphins, pelicans, maybe even alligators, just by paying attention to what is really happening in the natural world. So that's the introduction to today's presentation. Now, I'm going to mention Charles Darwin again. Charles Darwin was a very famous Unitarian in England, very famous scientist. You're all familiar with Charles Darwin. Darwin was born on February 12th, 1809. February 12th, 1809. And there was one other very famous person who was born in the same year, on the same day. And who was that person? Okay. Abraham Lincoln. Okay. Lincoln and Darwin were both born same day, same year. Their lives were very different in many ways. And yet, in their different ways, they were both involved with the Unitarians and the Universalists. And I have suggested to many people, particularly people outside of our Unitarian Universalist experience, if you really want to get to the heart of who we are, what we do, where we find inspiration, start with February 12th and think about Lincoln and think about Darwin. Lincoln and Darwin, now they were very different. They were both liberators, though, in different ways involved with liberal religion. I'm going to save the Lincoln discussion for another day, but if you want to understand democracy and what it requires, study Abraham Lincoln. Pay attention to what Lincoln did during a great Civil War. But if you want to understand nature and science, start with Charles Darwin. Darwin was born into a Unitarian family which was very prominent in England. His family had been involved with the Unitarian movement for several generations. The family sometimes went to Anglican churches on Sunday mornings, but they made it very clear that they liked the music. They were attracted by the music director, and they liked the ceremony, but they didn't believe in the Anglican catechism, so they didn't participate in communion. They kept their Unitarian identity, but they did like some of the pomp and circumstance and some of the good music that goes with the Anglican hymn books. Darwin, like most Unitarians back in the 1800s, was very Christian. Very Christian. He believed in every word in the Bible, literal translation, as a young man. And then when he became older, he made his famous voyage around the world. You all know about that experience on the ship Beagle. And when he came back, he had much to say about evolution, but he also had a lot to say about religion. He started to identify himself as an agnostic, although he stayed within the Unitarian Church. After Darwin died in 1889, actually just a little bit before he died, all kinds of people came forward to claim the Darwin legacy. Everybody said they wanted to, or at least many people said, they wanted to follow in his footsteps. Karl Marx himself, who didn't care much for organized religion, dedicated some of his books to Darwin. Darwin did not appreciate the honor, but it happened. Okay. A group called the Social Darwinists appeared because of Thomas Huxley and other people who really wanted to be the next generation of Darwinist thinkers. And again, Darwin sort of kept his distance from that crowd. But I think you're all familiar with social Darwinism because it's made an amazing comeback in recent years. When we talk about social Darwinism, it's this belief that what really matters in this world is raw competition, power, relationships, the ability for some species to dominate the rest of the world. And at the top of the Great Pyramid, humanity, and it's all one big struggle. And when you think this way, of course, you're already heading towards things like eugenics, extreme forms of nationalism, perhaps, imperialism in its different forms, racism. A lot of things come with a social Darwin package. And like I say, it has made an amazing comeback in recent years. You can find the influence of social Darwinism. We can find it in some of the schools, political parties, popular entertainment, and even in the White House itself. This belief that competition, raw power, is going to get us to where we really ought to go. Darwin himself did not like social Darwinism. He was embarrassed by it. I think you all know the famous saying that Jesus was not a Christian, Freud was not a Freudian, Darwin was not a Darwinist. That sort of thing happens. Social Darwinism has often been questioned and challenged, really, since Darwin was alive. One of the great philosophers, naturalists involved in the questioning of social Darwinism, this guy named Peter Kropotkin from Russia. And Kropotkin said, no. He said, the social Darwinists have got it all wrong. I've spent a lot of time, said Kropotkin, studying nature. And what I see in nature, yes, there's competition. There's a lot of competition. But what really matters in evolution, said Kropotkin much of the time, is cooperation. Humans learn how to live in peace with each other. Sometimes, after some difficulty, they learn how to help each other. Neighbors start to care for each other. But you don't have to look to humanity for this kind of altruism, said Kropotkin. Look at some of the social species. He spent much of his life in Asia. But here in Florida, when we think about cooperation among the species and concern for nature and the environment, we think about dolphins, pelicans, maybe alligators to some extent anyway. And especially we think about flamingos. Flamingos, they know how to behave in the right sort of way. I spent some time as a community minister for the UU Church in Key West. Key West has a lot of high regard for flamingos. You can learn a lot from those birds. And the congregation has different pictures on display for Flamingo Theology. Okay. 3 years ago, the congregation produced a video about mutual aid. I'll provide a definition in a moment. But I do want to mention Jimmy Dunson, who's with us, who helped with that project for the General Assembly. So, would you like to rise? Can you recognize? My understanding is you've recently been active with mutual aid projects in Israel and Palestine. You need to talk with this man. He has done a lot of good work in some very difficult places. Let me give you a definition of mutual aid. I'm going to reach for my papers. This developed from some of the work in Key West. Where is one? Mutual aid. Here's the definition. Mutual aid involves voluntary, participatory, and equalitarian arrangements for the exchange of goods, information, and services. Mutual aid involves face-to-face relationships with frequent encounters and a sense of responsibility. Boy, that's a long quote. That's a big definition. But the key points when we talk about mutual aid, we're not talking about something that government delivers by definition. We're talking about voluntary relationships, equalitarian relationships. The simple desire to be helpful to our neighbors, to enter into healthy relationships. Mutual aid doesn't come from the big corporations. We may be statistics somewhere, I'm sure we are. I'm sure that our consumer behavior is constantly tracked these days by computers. But that's not what mutual aid looks like. Mutual aid is much more intimate. It's very close to the heart. It involves personal experiences and the desire to be helpful, simply because we want to be helpful, because we want to empower each other. These are not acts of charity. We want people to be dependent on each other. It's much more democratic, and I think Lincoln would have appreciated the message. We want to enter into good relationships with others. And we don't have to go to the theologians and the philosophers and the political parties and the manifestos, not even the scientists, to learn about these things. We learn about these things through our own experiences, through socialization. And as I've said, watch the flamingos, because they know how to live in the right sort of way. A flamingo flock, I'm going to use that term for the moment, flock, can have hundreds of members, and in Africa even thousands have been reported. And somehow they live together in the right sort of way. There are very few conflicts. Very few. And they care for each other. The young, the old, those who seem weaker than the rest, they all receive support within the flock. They help each other to find food. They protect each other from predators. And in their own way, they understand their natural environment. They pay attention to the seasons. They know where to find food. They know where to find nesting places. I think we can learn a great deal from these birds. But we do have to slow down a bit. And we have to pay attention to what is frequently happening, perhaps if not in our backyard, maybe just a few blocks down the street. The lessons are the same all over Florida, although most flamingos live down south towards Key West. What else do we need to know? Well, you might ask me, what does mutual aid look like for humanity? You've talked about what it looks like for the birds. Well, what about us people? I've mentioned Jimmy Dunson and some of his experiences in Israel and in Palestine in recent months. You might want to talk to Jimmy about some of these things. 3 weeks ago, our great swim gathering came together. SWIM stands for, what does SWIM stand for? Okay. Southeast, Winter, Institute, Mid-Florida, SWIM. In Florida, Mid-Florida. Okay, all right. That's what SWIM stands for. SWIM is an intentional community. This is my understanding. Many of you have educated me about SWIM. I'm very grateful for what you've provided. SWIM is an intentional community. It's been in existence for over 50 years. It comes together once each year during the winter time. And winter has its delights, but it can still be a difficult season. Even here in Florida, where we have cold night shelters for homeless people, We try to look out for each other. We do wellness checks. Swim celebrates winter holidays, provides all kinds of programs led by volunteers, very practical-minded programs about cooking, how to prepare Cuban sandwiches. We did a program on that topic. This art of aging was much discussed. And we also had sing-alongs. We had a little bit of dancing. We did field trips. And all of this happens because people want to work together with each other year after year after year. It's all a volunteer production. And that, my friends, is a very good example of mutual aid. Yet it's very close to home. I'll give you another example. Yesterday was the Collard Green Festival in St. Petersburg. I live in St. Petersburg. Okay. Thousands of people come to this event. It's the biggest block party in town. Okay. Last year, I think we had close to 10,000 people, and I don't know the number for this year. But this, too, is an activity that started with volunteers in churches, where there was just a desire for people to help each other with community gardening, home cooking, good nutrition. And it started as a very small event, I understand, about 7 years ago. And now it's blossomed into an activity that extends for blocks and blocks and blocks in all directions. So we had finger painting, face painting for children. We had all kinds of musical events, shuffleboard, and lots of good food to share with each other. And this too, this community celebration for Black History Month, because it is very much involved with Black History Month, this too is an example of mutual aid in practice. Community gardening. Now I know that we went to the Meacham Farm when we had our swim activities. That's one of the best examples in Tampa, if you want to discover how people can work together for something that's really good, that benefits the environment, that benefits families, and I suppose it even benefits the wildlife. That's a very good example of mutual aid. I have some questions, which I was asked to answer some of these. Questions. Are flamingos native to Florida? What do you think? Yes, no, yes. The discussion goes back and forth. As of this month, the consensus, as near as I can tell, is yes, flamingos are native to Florida, although just barely. Maybe in the last 600 or 700 years, maybe just southern Florida. But that seems to be the consensus among ornithologists at the moment. Question. What do we call a flock of flamingos? Flamboyants. All right, you win the prize. Okay. They are very flamboyant indeed. Okay. They're a social bird, but they're also highly individualistic. Each flamingo knows how to live in his, her, whatever, own way. And they don't always get along with each other. They do have, other flamingos they like and some that they don't particularly like. But they know how to cooperate when cooperation is needed while keeping their individuality. Why are flamingos pink? That's another question I got asked. Why are flamingos pink? Their diet. Okay. All right. So presumably if they ate broccoli, they would be, anyway. But they don't eat a lot of broccoli, so they're pink. They're a product of their environment. I suppose we all are. The way we look, our shapes, how we proceed in life is all very much affected by our natural environment. How do we go forward from here? Well, again, I keep coming back to Lincoln and his faith in the people. The people will find the right sort of thing to do. Have faith in humanity. Have faith in your fellow Americans. There are times when your faith is going to be tested, and I think this is one of those times right now. But there are ways to move forward. And they don't involve big manifestos or big declarations or party platforms or anything like that, at least not at the beginning, although those things are certainly important. And charity certainly has its place, especially during emergencies. But again and again, it keeps coming back to this willingness to just reach out to neighbors, to meet them as equals, to extend radical hospitality, and just to be good to each other, not because we have to, but because we want to. And that's a lesson that the Flamingos teach. Blessed be.